Mr. Renacci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to thank you also for holding the hearing. I appreciate the witnesses, all of them. I also was a small businessman for almost 30 years. I also started out at age 24 with no money. I also went to a bank. I also borrowed, and I also had to sit at the kitchen table and figure out how I was going to make things end. Now, the only difference was I was a CPA. So I was able to understand the tax code and the complexities of it. But I will also tell you that I still, even understanding the tax code, was never really happy because after paying all the bills, I also had that partner that Mr. Kelly talked about, which was the Internal Revenue Service, that I had to make that payment before I could ever make a payment to myself. And I remember many, many times over many, many years never taking a payroll and never taking any money just to make sure the business survived so that the employees were able to get the money. So it comes down to, I mean, I had the ability of being my own CPA. It was funny, I took a business from 2 employees to 3,000 employees. And in the end, people used to come in and say, can I talk to your CPA? And they'd say, well, you are talking to my CPA, because I did understand the tax code. But for you all, there's complexities there. And what I've said all along, that the best thing that can happen is we simplify the tax code. And I want to kind of get into simplification, because I do really think that's important, and how we can simplify it and what we can do better. I know that for me, I filed many tax returns even for myself, and I think the biggest one was over 1,000 pages as well. So, and even I didn't know it. And by the way, I also had many audits in front of the IRS, and I'm not too sure even the IRS agent understood all the pages on the tax return as well, because it is a complicated system. So it does take a lot of time. It does take a lot of energy. And I think in the end, we need to figure out how to simplify. So give me some ideas of what you all do today and where you could see some simplification that would help. I mean, I understand where it might be, but I think my colleagues would like to hear from you. So, Ms. Mears, we start with you and then come across.
Well, as you mentioned, I do have to spend a lot of money in order to make sure that I make the tax deductions. And then at the end, I may not always get, yes, you can deduct that. And so now I've spent the money in trying to figure it out. And then at the end of the day, I can't deduct it, or I can only deduct a certain portion of it, and it still really doesn't do me any good. So it's a very challenging decision process to make when to research something or when to study it or when to trust it. I did have a CPA before. I said I had a new CPA. There's a reason for that. And I ended up overpaying a lot. I ended up having to hire a tax attorney to find out if I could. And again, by the time I did figure that out and I had to go back and amend my taxes, it was, it was 4 years too late. And so I don't think any business, I think we all want to support this country. We all want to partner up with everybody. That's what makes it so great. But no business should fail, and no employer should have to fire someone or not hire someone because they have to spend money on other things involved with it.
By the way, before I end, I do want to talk about taxes because my colleague, Ms. Sanchez, talked about it. The other thing that always drove me crazy, she mentioned some things, which are police, fire, courts. Those are all paid by local taxes. You know, when you're spending money for the federal government, she only mentioned 2 things, military and roads, and we should take care of our roads and we should pay for our military. But the problem is I always joke, we send $1 to the federal government, they take 10 cents, and we get 70 cents back. And my constituents say, yeah, you're missing 20. I go, yep, and that's a problem, because the government, sometimes we miss that 20 cents too. Mr. Vanderall?
Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate the question. I think for farmers and ranchers, it would come down to really 2 things. First of all, simplification, and also opportunity cost. On our farm, I prepare all the information that needs to go to our CPA, the person that does our taxes, and then he puts them through the mill, whatever that is, and he prints out our tax form, and he gives it to me, and he says, look that over and see if you see anything wrong, and then we'll send it in. Okay. So I try to follow it through. I look at the first page and follow it through to the various pages and forms that are referenced there, and I can't even begin to follow it. I consider myself fairly intelligent, but at the same time, if people can't fill out their own taxes, it's really a sad thing. And that gets me to my other point, is opportunity cost. We could spend that money that we pay our CPA, or the time that I spend.
You got to watch that, paying your CPA.
Upgrading our machinery, hiring more people and things like that. And the CPAs actually could help us run our businesses better rather than figuring out how to handle taxes.
Mrs. Pollard?
Between my mom's tax return and my tax return and the company's tax return, we end up paying about $30,000 a year to get those 3 tax returns done. So that's one of the main things. And there's silly things like meals and entertainment. We can only deduct 50% of meals and entertainment expenses that we have. So the other 50% actually shows up as income on my tax return and on my mom's tax return. That's, sorry.
Sorry. Well, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I yield back.
Thank you.